Welcome to my podcast, Jack to the Future. From science and inventions to pollution and recycling, I talk about what's changing in the world, the future, and how we can help with that. Every month I'll talk about a different future theme. For example, the future of science, tech, sustainability, reading, music, and all sorts of other ones. The future of everything. Did you know? You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as Jed to the Future and on YouTube as Jack to the Future. Follow me to get behind the scenes info, access to the previews about my next episodes, and much, much more. This week's episode is about the future of robots. I talk with Dr. Patrick Holthouse, who is the manager of the Robot House, a research house from the University of Hertfordshire. We talk about what the Robot House is and why it's there, how people find it interacting with robots, how they're programmed, and the jobs and activities that they can do, as well, of course, what the future of robots may look like. Did you know the word robots comes from the word roberta, and it means forced labour? That's basically making someone work like a slave. Robots are known to do things that humans either don't want to do or they find it tricky to do. Like we did in my last episode, let's go back to Jack to the past for a minute. In ancient China, there were stories of a mechanical man being given to the king, a golden lion that raised a foot to help him to his throne, and a mechanical eagle that placed his crown upon his head. So the idea of automatic machines has been around for thousands of years. Some of the first robots that are similar to what we see today were built in the 1940s by a scientist called William Walter. And he invented tortoise robots, and they were really, really cool. They actually knew when to come inside when it was raining outside, and they also have this little glass shelter over them, which keeps them from the rain. And he called them Elmer and Elsie, which are actually acronyms for electro and mechanical robots, light sensitive. These robots walk around and they are attracted to light like moths. They automatically went back to charge themselves when their batteries became low. There's a clip of them on YouTube, Mum will put a link in the description. Robots can be used for so many things. Robots in education, to help with crimes, at home, at work, in hospitals, for entertainment, you name it really. What do you think the future of robots might actually look like? I've talked about robots in quite a few of my episodes already. Robots painting, robots replacing jobs, replacing music, robots 3D printing food, and so on. We've also talked a lot this series about how, although robots are clever, they don't actually have feelings, and that human connection is missing. Well, that's exactly what my guest today has researched with his team. This may be particularly helpful when we're thinking specifically about how robots may help with things like giving people help at home, reminding to take their medicine, giving somebody who's lonely some company or other sorts of care that may be needed. Welcome to my podcast, Patrick. Thanks for joining me.
Hello. Hi, Jack.
For my listeners, I'm showing Patrick my toy robot whose name is Barrow. There's a picture of him on my social media channel as if you're interested. I've got this mini robot. He makes a weird noise and he rolls along his wheels, and it's got and then he can also move his arms up and down. Compared to what you make, he's really simple probably. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course we do have really, really complex robots. But this, I mean, it can run around, right? And it can move its arm already. That's nice. That's a good toy.
Yeah.
I like it. Now, we also have actually some toy robots that we use for research.
He also can carry trays.
Oh, really? That's lovely.
His arm shape, control him to come over to you, and then he can give you food or something. So, for question one, what is the Robot House, and what do you do there?
So, the Robot House is a really unique place. It looks like, and it is actually a really normal house in a residential area in Hatfield. And the only thing that we have there, which makes it really interesting, is that we have loads of different robots in there, and we do research with these robots. So basically the robots live in the house.
Really cool. I bet that's really interesting to research. Is it like a secret location? Nobody's really supposed to come there.
Yeah, nobody lives there. No. First of all, right? So it's only me and my colleagues going in, and we don't tell people where the robot house is, just to avoid that the neighbors are being upset. So we don't want them to be interrupted in their daily lives. Only those people who we invite for experiments that come to robot house then, and they need to promise us to not tell everybody.
Because you wouldn't want everybody going up to the house, because they'll be like, oh look, this is really cool. So you invite people there?
Yeah, we do invite them over to come to our house and interact with our robots. And so we want to know how these robots might in the future come into our society and live with us. We want to know how that works, how that might look like.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit more about the house? Is it just like a normal house inside?
So it's really a normal house where we have a big living room area with a sofa in and a TV and a place where you can eat. There's a kitchen that is like a normal kitchen with a fridge, an oven, and you can use all these things while you're there. And then in all the areas we have sensors that can detect humans. So for example, we know when somebody uses the fridge or when somebody switches on the lights. And this information we collect during the experiments, and we give these information to the robot that you're interacting with. So the robot knows what you're doing, basically.
Yeah. I watched a video on the BBC Red site about the house. I remember in the video it said, I think it was back in 2015, the lady who was doing it, she said about the sensors in the walls, and she did say that sometimes it can be a bit embarrassing if you're doing something that you don't want others to know about. Sometimes it might feel a bit embarrassing that they're being watched all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the robots don't really have feelings like us because they haven't developed enough. Wouldn't really have to feel embarrassed because they don't have any feelings about what you're doing. They just do their job, really.
Yeah, that is true to some degree, right? I mean, they don't have any feelings and they will probably never have any. So from my perspective, I can say I don't see robots having any feelings in the far future. But still, I can understand people feeling embarrassed or uncomfortable around robots, especially when you are in a very private situation. Imagine you're sleeping and then suddenly a robot stands next to you. That's maybe not what you want, right?
Thanks.
So that's exactly what we want to find out in Robot House. We want to see what is acceptable for a robot to do, what is good behavior, and what is unacceptable behavior. How does a robot have to be programmed to be accepted in our house? Because it's a very, very private space. And I mean, you want to be alone from time to time, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has their own private areas and these kind of things. And also preferences, what you like. Imagine you have a robot that makes breakfast for everybody. You want to have the robot make breakfast that's suitable to you, that's suitable to your mom, and suitable to everybody else.
Yeah, I guess everyone is different. I like muesli, whereas mum might have oats.
That's exactly what we want to find out. And therefore, the Robot House is a very good place to do so because we are in a natural environment where people feel comfortable and at home.
Yeah, they have to learn who likes what. So it's an experiment in real life. Got it. There was one of them on the website called Pepper, and about the names of the robots. Where do you get them from?
These robots, like for example Pepper, has been built by a commercial company, so you can buy it if you want to.
Oh, really? Cool.
And we just bought it, and the name Pepper is what it has been built as. They wanted to produce Pepper as a tool for selling things in their stores. So Pepper is actually a marketing tool. You can go to Japan, where they built this, to a store from the company SoftBank, and it will tell you, like, these are the new mobile phone contracts. And you can go to Pepper and interact with it. And they wanted to have a tool that is universally accessible, that looks nice, that can promote their items they sell. And they came up with a funny name that is A, memorable. It's a really easy name to remember. And B, also, it is gender neutral. So it's not a female or a male. It can be both.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, we saw a picture like a dog sort of robot. Are there any other animal sort of face robots that you have?
Yeah, so we have an Aibo, which is a dog, which is a kind of an older piece of technology. And then there's also Miro, which is a dog/rabbit. It can be interpreted as both somehow. So it's not an actual animal, but it resembles some of the features of dogs and some of these of rabbits.
Unusual, but okay.
We also have a dinosaur robot. Basically, yeah, you can think of anything. The idea here with the animals is that people are really familiar with dogs, for example. Right? So many people own a dog, and so they know how to interact with a dog. So it makes our life a bit easier as researchers how interaction works, because people that see that dog immediately know how to interact with it. They might see a wiggling tail and they know, oh, the dog might be excited, so the robot might be excited as well. So it makes interaction design, from our perspective, easy. And also it makes the robot likable. It's a cute little dog toy and people like it.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that, because it has like a special interaction. I think I'd have a cat. Well, the only thing at the moment, if you talk to robots and you talk to a human, if you compare, humans you feel more natural to speak to, but whereas robots you don't feel as natural. You know they're not real, they're just technology. So with a dog, you're right, yeah, they would definitely be like what you said, or the feelings, but they might feel like, well, it's not a real dog, so...
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's one good example as well for using a dog as a robot, because usually you don't talk to a dog and expect it to fully understand what you're saying. You also don't expect it to talk back. And some of our robots, they won't talk back. So it's a good example of seeing a robot in between human-human interaction and maybe human-animal interaction. So we can see how people interact with dogs to learn a lot about how people might interact with robots.
Yeah, that might make the interaction better in the future from what you've learned then. I get it. So why did you actually start the project? What was your idea?
There's lots of human-robot interaction research around the world. So many research groups study how to interact with these robots. And we did here in the University of Hertfordshire too. And one thing we noticed when people came to the university to participate in our experiments is that the university is a very, very artificial space. So people come here, they might be a little bit set off by coming into a lab, by seeing you're in a really artificial environment. They felt uncomfortable maybe a little bit. And also we didn't really know whether their reaction towards the robots was only caused because of the robots, but maybe because of they went into this space, right? And they came here to the university. So what we think is important in doing this interaction research is to make people feel comfortable and at home, that they don't have to be afraid of being like monitored all the time.
Oh. So they might feel anxious if they felt that they were in an experiment, but in the house it feels more natural, like they're in their own house.
Yeah, they just don't buy into the idea. What we do in our experiments is we tell a story. For example, I invite you to come to Robot House to help me clean up my home. And there's also a robot that might help too. And they buy into the idea of being part of this future scenario with a robot much more when they come into a real house and I tell them, look, I have these dirty dishes to clean up. Why don't you help me? And look, hey, there's also a robot. Maybe you pay attention to what it says, which makes it much more natural than if you come to a lab, which is an empty room. There might be some dishes standing around, but there's no kitchen. There's no living room. You don't feel like in a real environment. We don't want people to feel offset by the environment.
Yeah.
The sensors we have, you don't see them. They are all hidden. And if you go to the kitchen, it's quite an old-fashioned oven. For example, it's a gas oven. There's nothing fancy, nothing futuristic in there, with the exception of the robot.
Yeah, it's kind of like technology and normal mixed together.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you mean by that. When you program a robot to do certain things, it obviously gets more complicated for it to talk and talk back. Because if it says something to you and you said not just a yes or no answer, but like an open answer, and then you said a question at the end of that, and they had to answer back, you need to basically program it to recognize what you're saying and then in its data banks find an answer that it could say back, but then you'd have to have loads and loads and loads and loads of answers because it depends on what the person actually saying. Yeah. That's
really true. So if you compare our robots, for example, with a smartphone, where you can ask the smartphone any question, what it does internally, the smartphone is it goes to Google or any other search engine and then gives you the first result back, right? And then it talks that back. That's fairly easy thing to do. But imagine a robot that you can ask to clean your dishes and then it simply can't. So it has to really do things in the environment, in the house. Then most of the time you just say no, because you cannot do that. Or there's so many different things that you can ask a robot about, maybe what it has been observing yesterday or what the temperature was, that it's really, really difficult to program all these things in. So what we then do, if we have an experiment, is we have a certain fixed set of questions or sentences that can be asked, and then the robot can reply to these.
Yes. About when you said about the iPhone, like Siri, if you ask him something like, can you make me some toast? He says, I cannot do that yet.
Yeah.
They have to program it to say that. When he develops enough, if he actually does become an AI robot, he could go and get some bread, put it in the toaster, and then toast it. But if you asked it something it can't do, then, it can't do. So
yeah, the future idea is that these robots then can help you making your toast. But for now, when we do an experiment, we don't want the robot to offer all the possibilities. We want to play this one scenario that I just mentioned, maybe, for example, cleaning up. And then in this scenario, see how people behave. If we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 20, 30, 50 people coming in, all of them experience the same with the robot. And then we can see differences, how people like it, how people do not like it. And then we can find out on this one scenario. If you had too many different options, then it's really hard for us to figure out what was making them feel in a certain way.
Yeah. How hard is it and how long does it take to program a robot?
That really depends on what you want the robot to do. There are programming toolkits that even are designed for children to program a robot to do certain things. These kind of things are pretty easy to do if it's simple tasks. If you want the robot to say something, for example, that's really easy to do. Or if you want the robot to, I don't know, shake its head, then you can do that. It doesn't take a lot of time. But if you want to have very complex behavior, like we just talked about, tidying up, then it takes a long time because you need so many different things. You need the robot to identify, for example, what is a dirty dish. You need to use the camera, find out what that is. You need to make the robot realize this is a dirty dish, this is a clean dish. Then you need to distinguish between those. That's already really difficult to do. And then you need to decide, I need to go from here to there, find the correct way. Maybe there's some obstacle in the way. Navigate around that. Maybe there's a human saying stop and something else gets important and you need to plan something in the middle. So it gets really, really complicated after a while. And that takes a long time, months, years to complete.
Yeah. I know what you mean because I have got things like Lego Boost, which is this sort of thing you can program to do certain things, but the coding was already done for you. And also a website called Scrap.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
because it's really simple. You can tell it to move or turn around.
Yeah, that's really good. That's exactly the language in Scratch. It's visual, right? You can move blocks from here to there and connect them together. That makes you program the robot in an intuitive way. If you then want to do something which is very, very technical, for example, control the motor just to a certain angle or something, then you need to do number crunching, you need to get into the program code. That's then very, very different.
Yeah, but then to actually turn the limbs, robots, you need motors in all the parts, in loads of places really, to make a range of different bends.
Exactly, yeah.
Because a robot probably can grab, but it can't actually do movements that we can do.
Exactly, exactly. And you have to program all different steps, every joint. And some of our robots have many, many joints, like 7 or 8, that you need to program for each point in time in order to have it move in the way you want to.
Yeah. We watched a video from 2015 by the BBC, and they said that 80% of the robots could do things by themselves. Has this increased since then?
I don't think so. The thing is, a robot, as the word says, is something that helps you. And it is designed to be somewhat autonomous, but this is always within a certain limit. All the things that the robots do by themselves, they do because we program them to do so. And it's not like humans do, like we are curious, exploring by ourselves. Robots can't do that. They just follow our programming. But as you know, you programmed your robot to go do the moving animation. Then it might get to a point where it then can decide based on the camera image to go to the red place or the blue place. But it never can go to the green place if we didn't tell it that there was a green place.
Yeah.
So there is some degree of autonomy, but it's always within a certain fixed set of rules.
Yeah. The University of Hertfordshire have their own robotic football team called the BoldHearts. We watched a video of them and they're really impressive. I'm going to put a link in the description. They are the longest continuously active Robo Cup teams in the United Kingdom and one of the most successful. The team started in 2002 by Dr. Polanyi, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and is run by the computer science students at the University of Hertfordshire who are interested in AI and robotics. Some of the robots they were going to take part in the 2020 Robo World Cup. Did it actually go ahead because of COVID? How did they get on?
The last couple of iterations of Robo Cup have been online only. That is all in simulation where you don't have a real robot, but like a figure on the screen. So it has not been possible. It's a really big international event, usually, where people from all over the world come together to compete in football and in also other disciplines. And our team at the University of Hertfordshire, the BoldHearts, they have been quite successful in past times, and we enjoy participating there.
Yeah, some of the movements, well, they use like detecting with their eyes to detect the ball and then kick it. But when they actually did kick it, they only kicked it a tiny step because it's probably really complicated to actually kick the ball. To like improve the robot, I'm not saying you should, but if they wanted to do that, they could maybe add a little more force to pull the leg back and then kick it, and then it would move forwards more. I'm not forcing them to.
No. It's really good that you say that, because there's, as I said, different competitions in Robo Cup. Some of them are with a fixed robot, so you have to use a certain robot and you can't modify that. You can only modify what it does. And others, you can build custom robots where you can modify the robots, you can put in ideas like you have. And we try to do that. People try to be clever about how the robot might stand up if it falls over, or how to kick the ball in an efficient way. So this is what people actually do and try to do in RoboCup.
Yeah, if you programmed a robot to do tennis, you'd have to make it to get the arms and then move it and then get the bat and then take the ball and then move the arms and hit it, which would be hard.
Tennis is much more complex, probably.
Yeah.
Because in football, at least, the ball stops at some point on the floor. And in tennis, when the ball lies on the floor, you have lost.
Yeah.
So it's still far from being perfect. That's why there's the competition. So people get motivated to solve these complex problems in a game, because it's really difficult. All these things that you mentioned are really difficult. Detecting a ball, going to the right angle, kicking the ball, finding where to kick it, seeing an opponent player, trying to run around that player, all these kind of things. Standing up again is very, very complicated. This is why this competition exists.
Yeah, it would be really hard. It had an unusual way of getting back up, like a reverse move on its knees from lying down.
They were really clever about it, because the normal standing up of these robots makes them overheat quite quickly. And so they found a new advanced technique to stand up that didn't make the robot overheat. And that became the standard then. So they learned from the practice. And all these things that you learn from the football game, like recognizing things or communicating with your teammates, for example, that can all be applied to, for example, the research we do in Robot House. So we want to find maybe not a ball, but other things.
Yeah, because it would be really hard to get their movement right and them to actually know where they're going and go around people, because they might accidentally kick the ball into another player and then the player could take it from them. But as a human, we'd know obviously not to do that, because then we'd lose. So you need to program them to give it to, like if they were wearing a blue or red jumper, they need to give it to the red people, not the blue people.
As you said, we humans are really good in seeing other players, also identifying them based on their shirt color. But for robots, I mean, we can see this is yellow, even if there's a shade on it, or even if there's a light somewhere that tints it a little bit in a different color. So we still know that this is the color yellow. For a robot, this is much more complicated, because then the color is not the same. Because in a computer, colors are coded as numbers. And we say like yellow is usually the number 15, then it's suddenly a 17 or 18, but it might be that the computer doesn't recognize it as yellow anymore because of things like sunlight or shades or...
Yeah, although they might look quite the same to our eyes, they decide to not kick it to them because it's not the shade of color.
Yeah. And you have to be fair here. We humans, we evolved over millions of years to be good at that. And we learned this. Our brain and our eyes have developed over a long time to be really good. And a robot, I mean, is not that old, and we have to teach it to recognize it in a similar way than we do, because it ultimately it has to adapt to the human world in order to be helpful here. It needs to be similarly good as we are in order to be successful.
I think in future that robots will help people that need care, but also help people just with jobs around the house. How do you think robots will develop in the future?
You're quite right. That's the idea. The word robot is coming from a Slavic language, and it says this is a helper, an assistant, even maybe a slave for us humans. And so it's designed to help older people maybe, but also you and me in our daily tasks. For example, picking up things from the floor, or cleaning for us, or helping us with the shopping. And some of these robots are already here and around us. For example, vacuuming robots.
Yes, we have one of those.
And then I think this will develop in a way that there is certain specialized robots that can do different tasks in our houses. More advanced ones, maybe in special areas. After a long time only, there will be like a robot that we're talking about, like a humanoid thing that can do a lot of things in our house. because that's really complex. There's so many different things to do, so many different things to consider in our houses. If the robot is not useful to us, and if it's not behaving according to our rules and our ideas of how a robot should behave, we will simply put it off, switch it off, put it in a corner, and don't use it anymore.
That's kind of what happened to us in the vacuum robot, to be honest. Our old dog and my sister were both scared of it, and it used to get stuck on things.
Yeah, then if a robot is not fit for its purpose, there's no point in having it. If we learned enough from these robots and from our research, then in the future it might be some robots like humanoid robots.
Yeah, we use things under our sofa sometimes, and we have a torch, so we have to look under there, which is really annoying. So maybe there could be a robot that moves it out of the way, detects the things that we actually need, and then pick them up, and then maybe clean them off if they're all dusty, and then give them to us, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now imagine an older person sitting at home watching TV and losing their remote control. Yeah. And for them, it's a really difficult thing to stand up, go down to the floor, pick it up again. And robot might help with these things.
Yeah, like you said, sometimes old people, they might not be able to get something, or technology is new to them because they're not very efficient as I am with technology, because I've been born with having it and they haven't. So they might need more help with doing things like that.
Even if you grew up with the technology, it still should be useful. So they should help you, and you should be able to use them in an easy way. And that's what we want to know. We invite older people sometimes to see what they do around robots and to see how they feel, what support they need, how the robot should approach them so that the robot is also useful to them.
Yeah. The only problem is I was talking about this the other day and I lost something, and then I said, maybe this app could help me scan it or something. But then Mum said that it'd have to actually scan it and to know what the object was before it actually had to find it. So the robot would need to scan objects that you think you'll lose in your house before it actually finds them, because then it won't know what it's looking for. Like if you lost a slipper, it might find a slipper, but not yours. It might find your mum's or your dad's, or if there's a multiple of that thing they're looking for.
Yeah, you're right. That's a challenging task for us researchers in robotics. What we imagine what happens is that the robot has a database basically of maybe slippers. The robot is new. It arrives in your house. Then you unwrap it, comes out of the box, and it knows what a slipper looks like. That's okay because we can train it before here maybe. So it knows that. But then it doesn't know if it's your slipper or is it my slipper or is it anybody else's slipper. So what it does then is it needs to go around and figure out. It may ask you, is it yours? And then it remembers and tries to learn that. So this takes some time, yeah. If we program it for Robot House, it needs to learn how your house looks like, where the kitchen is. So you have to show it around. Right? Some things it might figure out by itself. So like a kitchen, you can easily identify because you see a microwave, a fridge, and an oven, so you know you're in the kitchen. But other places you might not. You might want to know if you have siblings, is it your brother's room or is it your room?
When people have come around into the robot house, what is their reviews on them?
Quite different. So usually when they see a robot for the first time and see it interact and talk to them and do things on its own, they are quite surprised. Some have a certain respect and they feel maybe uncomfortable. Sometimes they are super excited. They are really, wow, this is the best technology I've ever seen, really impressed. But then what we do to counteract for this first contact thing, we do a repeated experiment. So we invite them a second time and see what's going then. How do they feel around the robot? Then a third time maybe and see if it's still the same. Is it still interesting? Is it still acceptable how the robot behaves? These kind of things.
Yeah. I know what you mean, because some people who are just new to technology may not like it as much. I'd be amazed probably.
Yeah, if you're very excited for the first time, then for the second time you might not be as excited anymore because you know already how the robot looks like and what it does. So it's normalizing in a way.
Yeah. Do you think that the connection between people and the robots will become more human-like in the future?
Yes and no. What we are working on is to make the interaction between humans and robots easy and maybe a bit more natural, so that people from all ages can interact with the robot intuitively and just from the get-go and are not afraid. But some things, they will never be as natural as human communication. For example, as robots, will probably never have any feelings and emotions, then obviously you can't interact with it as if it had. That's also not a desirable thing. We don't want to pretend with our robots that they would be humans.
Yeah. In films and toys, robots tend to look like a human with a head and arms and legs. I don't know about you, but I find it a bit strange when robots are made to look like us. And naturally in real life, a lot of our robots don't look anything like humans, do they?
There's different lines of research on this. So some people, including me, believe that like a more cartoon-like appearance is really, really helpful, where there's certain human features like eyes, maybe a mouth, ears, that indicate that the robot can see things, that the robot can hear things, that the robot can speak, that can show attention, that the head can move around, that are really useful for interacting with a human, because humans intuitively know how to talk to it. But then if these are a little bit abstract and not really perfectly mimicking a human, then it's much better because you also recognize that it's a robot and not a human. There's a thing in interaction research that's called the Uncanny Valley, where people are actually afraid of things that are really, really close to a human, but not an actual human. So there's like a mismatch somewhere where the eye is slightly in a different angle or the artificial skin is not in a correct place. And it looks really, really scary. And people are afraid of that. And I believe that's true for most of the robots that are really human-like nowadays, and I don't think that it's desirable to look exactly as a human.
Yeah, they're developing more and more human robots, but they look more and more realistic. But when you actually talk to them, one thing with them is the voice. So they might record someone's voice to actually go with them. Like Siri, he has his own voice. He can change his voice, not just a normal robot voice.
Yeah.
Also, you might need to emphasize on a certain word. I'm talking right now in different pitches of my voice, so they might need to not just be in one tone of voice all the time. Hello, how are you? Something like that. They need to actually change intonation with their voice.
Yeah, you're right. No, I mean, there's people working on that, but yeah, I understand that's not natural as of now. And also, it's not only voice, it's also movement, for example. So to have movements as humans, smooth as humans move, is really, really complicated thing to do. And even if the robot looks perfectly like a human, like a wax museum figure, it's still the movements would be offsetting and uncomfortable, like the voice as well. And also, imagine you have a robot that's perfectly mimicking a human, then is it ethical to do this? I don't know, because you're basically pretending to be a human, and in fact you're not, and that's lying and deceiving.
Yeah, they look much cooler than us.
Yeah. They do, yeah. I mean, also Pepper is like really, it is human-like, right? And it has a nice shape, and you can interact with it in a fairly natural way without it being pretending to be a human.
Yeah, these sorts of things look much more cooler than we do, because maybe we might have spots on our face or something like that. We have certain things in our body that robots may not, obviously won't, because they're, man-made. If I added hair to the top of my robot, it would look a little bit weird. Thank you so much for doing my podcast today. I really enjoyed it. And my favourite part was when we talking about how long does it take to program it for a robot, because it was really interesting learning for proper coders. It must be really complicated.
Thank you for having me. It was my pleasure. It was really interesting to talk to you, and you had really, really good questions. I enjoyed that you are really curious, and that was really, really nice. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bye. That's all we've got time for today. It's been really interesting learning about the research at the university and all the hard work that goes into programming. It's very clever, isn't it? Maybe one day if I'm a researcher and I can visit the robot house and do my own experiments, that would be cool. Like I've said before in other episodes, I don't think robots will replace humans, but they'll help us do things and work sort of alongside us. Most robots actually rely on us to program them or to tell them what to do, which again needs us to program. I think we're safe for now. I think that'll actually be a good thing in the future. The only thing that I think might be a problem is these robots only have a battery that lasts a little while, so hopefully if we can find any way of infinite electricity, that would be good for the battery power, so it lasts a little while. If you've got Sonic the Hedgehog movie, we can maybe find his spike and use all the electricity from that, because it's unlimited. Join me next time for another exciting episode of Jack to the Future.